Question: are you doing something to enter a state of neutrality, a conscious self? If yes, what and for what purpose? Do you need to experiment with it, or let it go as it goes, or let it go as it goes and be spontaneous? Well, what I've talked about in many of my videos is that the core of our being is the conscious you, or the conscious self. And the conscious you basically what gives us the awareness to look at ourselves, to be aware of ourselves. It's, as I've given the example several times, you are now watching this video, but you can mentally step back and realize you are sitting here watching this video. You can step back from the room you're sitting in, you can step further back until you are somewhere out in space, looking down at Earth, looking at your body watching this video. This is the conscious you. And the conscious you is neutral awareness, or pure awareness, which means it isn't your outer personality. It isn't your ego or these subconscious selves, separate selves that make up the ego. And that's what's important about neutrality. Because the effect of these subconscious selves, separate selves, is that they form a perception filter. It's like the example I've used so many times: you put on colored glasses and everything you see is colored by the glasses. It's not that you are not still seeing the things in the room, but everything has a colored tint. So when you are inside the self, you can't see the perception filter. You can't see the self. When you are wearing the glasses, you can't see the glasses. You can't see how they're coloring you. So you don't realize that the way you look at life is colored. And that's why in order to overcome the self, you have to use the conscious you's ability to mentally step outside the self and experience itself as pure awareness. And you know, as the question says, are you doing something to enter a state of neutrality? Well, you can do various things. I mean, there are different forms of meditation that are aimed at basically getting you to a neutral state of mind. You can also, as I said, do the exercise where you are, mentally stepping back from wherever you're sitting. You can do self-inquiry. Who am I? Am I the body? Am I my feelings? Am I my thoughts? Am I my outer sense of identity? Am I more than this? And so there are various things you can do, but really it's like, for me, I can see that if I look back, when I first found the spiritual path, I was not in a neutral state of mind. I clearly had a desire or a goal that I wanted to achieve a higher state of consciousness. And I didn't understand that that really meant a neutral state of consciousness where I wasn't judging everything based on the dualistic state of mind and these subconscious selves. I didn't grasp that at the time. So back then I wasn't able to be neutral. I always had this coloring. And so over the years I have resolved certain things in my psychology, and you could say with the model I'm giving here, the model is very simple. The conscious you is neutral. But it has created over many lifetimes all of these subconscious selves. And when you step inside of these selves, you are seeing through that perception filter, that coloring. So the spiritual path is about resolving one of these selves at a time. And each time you resolve a self, there's less of a pull on the conscious you. Now, the conscious you can at any time suddenly step outside the selves and experience itself as neutral awareness. It can happen. This is what you call a mystical or intuitive experience. And in my experience, most spiritual people have had it, even if they're not really aware of what it means. But they've had it. And so this gives you a certain frame of reference where you can start seeing that perhaps your normal perception filter isn't the ultimate reality. Therefore, you can be willing to question it. And the more you question it, the more you can resolve these subconscious selves, and the less of a pull you have for the conscious you to be pulled into the perception filter, the easier it is for the conscious you to step outside, which means you will have more of these mystical, intuitive experiences, where you step outside and now you're experiencing. It's like you can step outside a situation. I've experienced this many times. You have a certain situation where you're reacting, and in a sense, once you get the dynamic there, you can see that, oh, I'm reacting here, so I know this reaction comes from a subconscious self, but I can't quite see it yet. But if you connect to this, and you have experienced before, that there is something outside of this self, there's a different way to look at it. You can sometimes, it's like the consciousness now steps outside the situation, you're looking at the situation from the outside, and then you're looking at it neutrally. You're not so polarized into a specific reaction. And when you look at it neutrally, you can say, oh, what I see, first of all, this is not the only way to react, but I also see, why am I reacting? It's because I have a certain belief that thinks I have to react this way, or I am a certain type of person, and therefore I feel threatened by whatever the situation is, for example. So once you step outside of that and look at it neutrally, it's much easier to resolve it. And, there's a certain dilemma in this, as I said. The more of these subconscious selves you have, the more of a pull there is to the conscious you, and the harder it is to step outside and be neutral. And so that's why I have met people over the years who say, oh, but I have done all of this. I did meditation. I did this non-duality. I did mindfulness. I did all of this, but I can't get out of it. I can't get out of my reactionary state. And so, I have actually met people, I couldn't help them. I couldn't, there was nothing I could tell them that made them step outside into a neutral state of mind instantly. The only thing I could say to such people is you need to keep working with the path as you see it, and keep using these teachings about how to step outside of the subconscious selves, how to resolve the subconscious selves, how to resolve your psychology. Because the more you resolve it, the more it lessens that pull, and there will come a point where the conscious you snaps out of it. And so there are people in one side of the spectrum who feel like they've never had this neutral experience, that they can't get into neutrality. Then there are people on the other side who feel like they had this very powerful experience of stepping outside and being neutral. But now they think, oh, I've awakened. I'm now enlightened, or at least awakened, and I have reached some ultimate state of consciousness, and I no longer need to look at my unresolved psychology. And both of these are unbalanced, because it will take you a long process of resolving these subconscious selves before you can be permanently in a neutral state of mind. But of course, as you resolve this, you are more neutral, more and more neutral. There came a point some years ago where I suddenly realized one day, I don't really have any human opinions anymore. It's like whenever you have an issue come up, I don't have an opinion about it, and I don't feel I have to have an opinion. I don't have to select one of the dualistic polarities and say, oh, this is the truth. I can just look at the issue neutrally. And for me, this just, in a sense, you could say it happened spontaneously, but it of course happened as a result of this long process I've been going through of being on a spiritual path for all of these years and doing whatever I could to resolve my psychology. So, the last part of the question, well, are you doing something to enter a state of neutrality, and what is the purpose of it? Well, the purpose of it really actually is to be neutral, so that, first of all, I'm not pulled into one of these strong reactions that you see people being pulled into. And the other is to just be able to look at an issue neutrally and not be pulled into one of these polarized, because you see how the debate goes in the world. It's becoming more and more polarized. So take COVID, vaccinations. I knew people who had been on the spiritual path for many years, been very sincere, and been in ascended master teachings for many years and been very sincere. And they were instantly pulled into this, oh, vaccination is bad, you shouldn't get vaccinated. And see, I'm not here trying to debate vaccination in this video at all. I'm just saying they were pulled into this very strong reaction. And to me, it was clear that reaction was not neutral. It was polarized. Now, you could have an opposite where you just blindly accept whatever they say. That's the opposite polarity. But you can also step back and have a more neutral view where you can make a neutral decision about what you are going to do personally, but it doesn't come from this strong reaction. So you see, this is what I'm striving for, to have a neutral view of every issue so that I'm not pulled into a strong emotional or mental reaction to it. Because the more neutral I am, the more I can connect to the one mind instead of being in the polarized dualistic mind. So, and my purpose is, really, my long-term purpose is to come to a point where, like the Buddha exemplified when he was sitting under the tree and he was confronted by the demons of Mara, he had no reaction to them because he had no attachment to anything on earth. So my personal goal is to come to a point where I have no attachments to anything on earth so that I can't be pulled into a reaction. And do you need to experiment with it or let it go as it goes and be spontaneous? Well, that's a very delicate balance to find personally, because as I said, you need to follow a process of seeking to become neutral by resolving these cells, because the cells are always polarized. They're always based on duality. They spring from the duality consciousness. So you need to experiment with that, and you need to also look at yourself and evaluate if you have been through a certain situation. Did I react? Was I pulled into a reaction? Was it unbalanced? But in the end, you can't think your way into neutrality. So it can only happen spontaneously. But it doesn't happen by you sitting on a bench and waiting for it to happen. It happens as a result of this process of disentangling the conscious you from all the subconscious selves. So there's less of a pull, and then spontaneously you go into a neutral state of mind. But see, it's also important to have the intent that you want to be neutral instead of you want to be right. You want to have the final answer. I've met many people who think that discernment, Christ discernment or whatever you call it, is a matter of always being right compared to others, or always having the ultimate answer. But that won't allow you to be neutral, because you are looking for something. Neutrality means you're not looking for something. You are asking a question without having any desire in your mind for a predefined answer. And you can really only do that when you don't have a subconscious self that creates an attachment to a specific issue. You don't have to be free of all subconscious selves before you can experience the neutral state of mind. But if you have a particular issue where you have a subconscious self that's based on this polarized opinion, then you can't be neutral on that issue unless you are willing to step outside the self, unless you are willing to say, okay, I can feel I'm having a reaction in me, like the vaccination. In my view, people who got, as I said, these ascended master students got pulled into this. They should have been looking at themselves and saying, okay, I am sensing now that I'm being pulled into this strong emotional reaction to this. And I have a desire to be right, and I have this sense that this is the ultimate view of this. And they should have said, okay, I see that I'm being pulled here. I must have an attachment to this. Let me try and step away from it and be neutral. And that's what you can do in any issue, whatever the issue is. When you feel this, there's a pull. And you realize there's a subconscious self pulling on you. Let me just try and step back. And you can at least strive to be completely neutral. As I said, you're just asking an open-ended question. You don't have any preconceived opinion what the answer should be. And if you can really be open, then you will receive an answer from your higher self, from your ascended masters. It will come from the one mind. But it really requires you to be completely open, to be the open door. And you think about this image, the open door. I mean, many people, when I lived in the United States, everybody had a screen door, right, to keep mosquitoes out and flies. So this is what we have in our minds. The subconscious self is like a screen door. There is an impulse coming to you from the one mind about a particular issue. But the subconscious self forms a screen door and keeps that neutral out, because it only lets in what it thinks is right. So you're seeking validation for preconceived opinion, and that's not neutrality, and therefore you won't receive something from the Christ mind. You'll receive something from whatever dualistic mind corresponds to what you want to believe. And that's why, as I've said before, in duality, there is plausible deniability and plausible plausibility. You can deny anything that contradicts what you want to believe. You can validate whatever you want to believe. And that's what I saw some people do with vaccines, some people with Trump, some people with other issues. That's duality. And if you want to be neutral, you have to be willing to, first of all, recognize what duality does, but also just strive to just openly ask. Just show me. I mean, I often ask the masters, I will ask for specific issues for help in seeing something in my own psychology, but I also often ask, just help me see what I'm not seeing. Just help me see what I'm not seeing. And quite often I get an answer with something I had never thought of before.